Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're here.
Hey, how you doing?
It was hard to do stuff for the show this week when I know we're going to have such an awesome show next week.
Maybe. I mean, we've already said, like, episode 50, we're bringing our own creepypasta stories, personally written, handwritten on parchment. I was working on mine yesterday, and I think it will be a good episode, but it was just kind of like, man, I haven't written fiction in a long time, and it shows.
I am so bad at it because when we used to write, like, video game reviews or, like, news items or stuff, you don't have to worry about thinking up, like, a beginning, middle, and end. You just write your stuff.
Yeah.
With fiction, it's like, I always get about halfway through, and I'm like, this isn't going anywhere good.
Yeah, like, I'm lucking out, and, you know, I'll talk about it a little bit next week, but the story I'm writing is kind of a retelling of a story my dad told me once, and so if it's a bad story, I get to blame him.
When mine's a bad, because there's no if about mine, but there'd be nobody to blame but myself.
Yeah, it really will be my fault because I'm probably misremembering a lot of details about it, but, you know, I'm sure I'll get hate mail from him as soon as he can learn to work an email.
He'll call you up specifically. He's like, Ben, I want to send you hate mail, but I don't know how. Can you walk me through it?
Now, my dad's one of those people who, like, he sends text messages like they're letters. So every text message is like, hey, how's it going? Love, Dad. It's like, you don't have to put love, Dad. I know this is a conversation. It's a back and forth. But yeah. Anyway, that's next week. Getting stuff ready this week was actually really easy for me because we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but, like, we haven't really decided, you know, after 50 what we're doing. You know, so with that in mind, I was like, you know, I have to do at least one more Japanese monster show before we kind of figure out what's happening after 50. You know, so I went to my new favorite website. I talked about it before last time I did this, which was episode 43, I think. Yokai.com brings us all of these today because it's just the perfect site, and I'm going to buy their books and shit and just read about Japanese monsters for the rest of my life. So first thing we got here today is the Oni Hitokuchi, which is related to the Japanese legend of the Kami Kakushi, which is just another way of saying spirited away, which is when somebody is kidnapped by spirits and taken to that other world. It's also a fantastic animated movie.
Very good, yeah.
But and when this happens, people are said to come back many years later deeply traumatized from the experiences, which doesn't happen in that movie. It would have been a pretty fucked up animated movie if the kid came back from her adventure just scarred. But the idea of the Oni Hitokuchi is a description of a case where somebody doesn't come back because a demon just fucking ate them in one bite.
Oh, yeah.
And so...
Well, I would say if I'm going to have to be eaten by something, be it a demon or a giant animal or something, one bite is how I want to get. Like, I don't want to be eaten in, like, 30 bites.
Yeah, that's true. Just taking a demon taking its time, right. Rolling you around in his mouth would probably suck pretty hard. But so a famous legend of this centers around the poet and playboy Awara no Narihara, who I guess had the hots for this noble lady named Takaiko, and they began a relationship, but due to her high social status, they had to keep their affair secret, and Narihara hated this arrangement. So he handled it like any horned-up psycho would and kidnapped her. He took her out in the woods, and then a terrible storm struck. They took shelter in a cave, and while Takaiko was staying in the far back end of the cave, the nervous, paranoid Narihira stood by the entrance with his bow and arrow ready. When the storm had cleared the next morning, Narihira went to the back of the cave to find Takaiko, only to discover she was gone, that an Oni who had lived in the cave devoured her entirely, and that her screams have been drowned out by the sounds of the storm during that night. Or my ending would be she just found another way out and said, fuck this maniac, I'm going home.
Right.
Like, you know, I was immediately reminded, like, oh yeah, these Japanese legends, like, women get completely fucked over in every single story.
But at least in like half of them, they come back as some kind of demon creature and exact revenge on all men for the rest of eternity.
That's true, which goes into our next one, in fact. But it's kind of a bullshit criteria to become that vengeful demon. The Saze Oni is probably one of the oddest cases of shape-shifting monsters I've talked about on this show, and I've talked about a lot of them. The Saze Oni are basically monstrous water demons who are visually kind of similar to a mermaid, but instead of a fish lower half, they're snails.
They got the short end of that stick.
Yeah, it's kind of shitty. Their human-like female upper bodies also can have like thorns and shit on them. They're very deadly. But you know how they usually kill people is they're able to turn into beautiful women, and this, you know, lures seamen famously to their doom. This ability to shapeshift usually has them pretending to be drowning victims, crying out to be rescued, and then when they're pulled up on the boat, they wreak havoc. Which really just sends the message, don't rescue drowning people at sea, because they might kill you. Like, I guess that's the moral of these stories. But they can go on land. When they do that, they just have the appearance of a lone wandering woman who will stay at inns and eat innkeepers at night. So kind of similar, like last time I talked about this stuff, like I talked about spider demons who start as just normal fucking orb weavers, and then after enough time, they turn into demons. And it's similar with these fuckers in that they're just normal turban snails, and then they turn 30 years old and get magical powers.
I like it. It's plausible.
Sure. But they can also come about if a lustful young woman is thrown into the sea, which I don't know. That's not what you do with lustful young women.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, that seems like a perfectly, like, bad waste of a great lustful...
Oh, God, not again. Get her out of here. But she has to turn into a snail first, and then she still has to do that 30-year criteria before she gets to be a vengeful demon. As somebody who's steadily getting closer to 30, I'm really hoping this yokai rule of free magic at depressing milestones is true.
Yeah, but see, you'll go from being a human to turning into a snail. Like, your 30 years is up. You're just a regular snail.
That wouldn't be too bad, though. You know? Snails seem pretty chill about shit. Anyway, one legend about the Saze tells of a band of pirates who spotted a woman drowning. They rescued her only to just rape her that night. The woman actually ended up being a Saze, and during the night visited each pirate one by one and cut their testicles off. Amazingly, nobody woke up right away from this. So literally...
but they woke up, just not right away.
Like... Yeah, they woke up like, what the fuck? But it was all kind of at the same time. So literally having the pirates by the balls, she demanded the pirates' treasure for their return, and they immediately complied. I guess they thought they could get them on ice and get back to town. But that's the story. That's how it ends. There's like, she got all the treasure, and they're like just holding their balls, I guess. Next up is the omukade. The omukade is just a giant centipede. It's so big, in fact, that one legend tells of an enormous one that is said to have its body wrapped around Mount Makami 7.5 times. While a regular Makade centipede has a painful bite and they're aggressive little bastards, the Omukade was said to have much stronger venom, and their strength and size supposedly has even made them known to torment dragons. Their exoskeleton can't be pierced by weapons, but they do have one great pulled out of your ass weakness: spit.
That's a very convenient weakness. Like, not for the monster, but for the
right.
person.
We'll never run out. So
I knew I shouldn't have ate all those saltines. Fuck.
Oh god, the one time I need it. So yeah, coat any weapon in human saliva, and it'll suddenly be able to tear right through that armor. And this was told in one legend about the one wrapped around Mount Makami, about a brave warrior named Hide Sato, who shot every damn arrow he had at the damn centipede until he only had one remaining. For some reason, he could only think to spit on the arrow and say a prayer. Just so you know, he was really at the end of his rope, like, fuck, I've tried everything. And for some reason it worked, and the giant centipede fell.
How do we know it wasn't the prayer that worked? Not the spit.
Yeah, don't give God's credit. It had to be the spit. Next, the Yonaki Baba is an unkempt old woman in plain robes who appears outside houses where tragedy is struck, or is about to strike in some cases. She'll supposedly just be attracted to the sadness from within the home, and she'll stay outside just weeping loudly all night long. While some say they are just sharing in the sadness of others, some say that their weepings are meant to mock people who are really sad. Either way, it's one of the most annoying fucking monsters I've ever heard about doing this show.
That's interesting to me because it's very similar to the European idea of a banshee.
Yeah, but this one just sort of hangs out,
Yeah.
like she's just crying. Like a banshee's there's kind of a shrieking and stuff. This is just some old woman. I imagined people get the fuck out of here, get off my porch, and she always ends up coming back. Their weeping is supposedly contagious, as those who hear it can't help but not weep themselves. And if the fucking asshole decides that she's going to just keep coming to your house night after night, your family is probably going to fall into ruin because you're just crying all the fucking time and nothing's getting done. It's not known if they bring the tragedy themselves or if they're just a herald for some fucking personal disaster to come. But, it is a real case of helping or hurting, asshole. It is kind of interesting because it almost seems like an ancient description for depression. A lot of monsters are used to kind of describe, forces of nature and stuff. If a tornado were to hit, it's a tornado god or something. And this is what if a family just emotionally fell apart?
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. And then next up, the Rokuru Kubi and the Nuke Kubi. These two types of yokai start as women, but are usually cursed for some evil or misdeed. Either they sinned against the gods or nature, or they just cheated on their husband, which back then was the equivalent of defying God and nature. That's to say they did anything wrong at all, because as Japanese myths go, these women could be cursed because of shit their husbands and fathers did. So somehow the dudes would just get out of Dodge, while unlucky women would just end up with a horrible fucking curse. And in this case, they would have normal existences by the day, but at night when they went to sleep, their heads would gain a will of their own, and the physical properties of their necks would completely change. So the Rokuru Kubi's neck would just stretch to an incredible length, allowing the head to roam around freely. The head would normally just attack small animals, lick lamp oil for some reason, or just start scaring nearby people.
Well, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't even have to try at that point if you just see this.
Yeah. And then by morning, the head will return, and the person will have no memory of what they had been doing that night, including one really sad story about this, but it was also a little funny. Was a girl who kept getting fired from every job as a servant because at night she'd have her fucking neck going everywhere. Her bosses would see it and freak the fuck out and fire her. But nobody ever told her that this was happening, so she was always just getting fired. Like, what the fuck? What do I do? And that's her whole story. It's just like she can't keep a job because her fucking... She's cursed and doesn't know it.
Neck discrimination, and that would never stand in today's world. Actually...
It definitely would. You kidding? Like, we can't stop discriminating against people who are completely normal and just slightly different from us. Like, we could not handle a fucking stretchy neck, goddamn slinky demon.
Look, Gertrude, when you scared my cat, that was fine, whatever. Licking my lamp oil, weird, but
yeah,
fine.
I was willing to put up with.
But then you got into the fucking fridge and you ate all my food again.
I'm just saying, you know, like, I'm willing to put up with you eating my pets, but what's this Ramadan shit you're bringing in?
I tripped over your neck when I was trying to get to the bathroom, and that's the last straw.
So that's the more kind of, it's a mischievous sort of Oni, but it's not really like a full-on violent one. The Nuke-Kubi is a more vicious little fucker. And in this variation, the head comes off completely, allowing it to just fly around and attack shit. It's way more angry and violent and possesses a thirst for blood. Usually it'll try to just like suck blood like a vampire, but occasionally it has been known to just start flat out eating people.
Well, where does it go?
It'll just fly into town or some shit.
No, I mean if it's eating people, like, you can swallow, but there's no neck or body or anything for it to. It's just like they just find chewed up chunks of people on the floor.
It's just spitting out the neck cavity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oddly enough, they didn't think about that detail. So people have often searched for treatments to these curses because the affliction can pass from mothers to daughters. If no cure is found, women would often be sent off to brothels, just disowned from their families.
Look, you turn into a killer freak at night, so
yeah,
go be a prostitute.
And that's bullshit, because that affects me. You know, like, why is your family problem becoming my problem in certain districts in town? But yeah, so they would like just disown them, and a lot of stories these women would commit suicide rather than live a life as a monster. One legend states that a man named Hitachi had married one Nuke-Kubi and learned of a cure from a peddler that said a liver from a white-haired dog can remove the curse. So he owning a white-haired dog killed it and fed her the liver, and miraculously it worked. Unfortunately, she passed the curse to their daughter, and that flying head made it her mission to kill any white dogs she found to prevent them from feeding her their livers.
And that's why to this day you will not see any white-haired dogs in Japan.
You're right. Name one, except I follow a Twitter account that just posts them all the time in Japan. Your other option when dealing with them is when the head leaves for the night, you can, like, and this is really, like, you really just want this shit to stop, you can hide the body so that the head can't get back to it. By morning, the head and the body will be dead, and, you know, this is fine if you really don't give a fuck about who you're killing.
Well, then could you just kill the person while they're, like, awake? Like, if you're just going to kill the person, why do it that way?
Maybe, but what if the head just comes alive then? Yeah. Like, this is a guarantee that you'll get them both, and that's fine if you're a fucking murderer. So these families, you know, will be extremely sad usually if they go this route, because it's not really a cure any more than, well, we could shoot her and see what happens, you know, like,
right.
But I do like that in this legend they thought of that. Like, they were like, you know what?
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, what happens if you capture the head? Like, put it in a box? But I guess,
right.
the answer would be that they'd die in the morning.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I got this week. You know, there was another one I was going to touch on, but there really wasn't much to her. It was just like this demon. It was a prostitute with really long hair, and apparently that's really scary to people.
Well, it depends where the hair is coming from.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Some stories say it's all over her body. Others people say she just has long hair covering her face. And it's like, that's not, you know, I don't hate
sometimes
long hair.
Sometimes that's a benefit. It depends what the face looks like, right?
Jesus. I don't think either of us are qualified to give any appearance jokes.
Yeah, if somebody needs face covering long hair, it's definitely
when we say that doesn't sound so bad, we're thinking we should grow our hair out because it might make us more appealing. But yeah, that's more Japanese legends to freak you out at night.
Ooh. See, it's funny because it's like, yeah, those are so far-fetched it'll never freak. But, you know, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and check Tara's neck to make sure it's the right length. Like, she'll be sitting there watching TV when she gets home later, and I'll pull out a tape measure. What are you doing? Nothing.
Well, it's supposed to be noticeable, so it would be great if you were just, like, micromanaging. Did you know your neck grew half a centimeter?
I think you're a monster.
Like, you know, and that's the type of shit that would make me really self-conscious. Like, if I had a girlfriend just telling me that my neck was slowly growing at night, I would be so fucking freaked out by everything about that situation.
See, you need a girlfriend that does. I'm trying to think. Neck doesn't really work because there's no, like, article of clothing that you could slowly alter to make you feel like it's...
Just add turtlenecks.
Anyway. Well, I'm gonna, like... this is kind of a theme, and I'm doing to myself what you just did to yourself, because my topic is Japanese samurai. Because I just finished... Sekiro and couldn't think of anything else, and I'm like, let's look up some actual samurai.
See how close I am to, you know, being one of them.
And what I mean by, like, I'm going to bend myself here is that this is chock full of names that I'm going to absolutely butcher, but it is what it is.
I mean, to be fair, that's a Steve OG thing.
That's true. I mean, it could be like James Smith, and I'd be like, Jam Smythe.
Jameis Smith. But yeah, you're right. I fucking butcher everything I touch here.
No, you do pretty good, but you just give yourself like the hardest names in the world to pronounce, and so I'm going down that route. I have just a handful of them, and most of them are pretty short. But I tried to like also make a note. I'm not going to do the like typical Steve thing where I'm like, so and so was born on this date in this place. But I did try to make a note of like what relative like time period they're from and where applicable, like who, you know, samurai a lot of times served, you know, a master or served somebody else.
Because you're here with an expert who, if you get one time period wrong, I'm going to call your ass out on it. Because
that's the other thing. I was kind of self-conscious writing this, so I went the opposite route, and I'm like, I'll be as sloppy as possible because this seems like something that Ben may or may not know something about.
I don't know shit about it. So, like,
okay.
I've watched a lot of shows that referenced Edo periods and stuff, and I don't know anything about them. So.
Well, good. Well, the first guy up is Minamoto no Tametomo. His life was around 1139 through 1170, and he served the Minamoto clan. So, Minamoto no Tametomo was a samurai known as perhaps the world's greatest archer. It is said that he was born with one arm 6 inches longer than the other, and that abnormality let him draw the bow more powerfully than the average person.
Okay, so he's a demon. He's a variation of one of the demons I was just talking about.
I couldn't figure out how having one arm longer than the other would like add power to the bow. like...
It would let you stretch it further, right?
Well, but just wouldn't having 2 arms that are long stretch farther than having only 1 arm that's long and one that's regular? I mean...
Yeah, if you were... Yeah, but it's an abnormality.
Abnormality, yeah.
So I guess if you looked at it that way, it's that you had 1 arm way too short. But, you know...
Yeah, maybe he had a normal arm and a 6-inch plus arm.
You know, it's like glass half full.
Yeah.
Spin on this.
So, according to the legend, Minamoto no Temetomo was so powerful with a bow that he once sank an entire ship simply by shooting it once below the waterline. So...
That took a long time, then.
I like that his short or extra long arm, whichever, also like makes arrows more like powerful so that they can go through.
I want the story on the other side of that. The people on that ship who are staring at just like an arrow hole in the ship, and like I don't know how to plug it. I don't know what to do.
That's a very good point. They never say in the legend how long it took the ship to
and they're
sink.
just staring at the water like, Captain, what do we do? Fuck, I don't know. Abandoned
3 weeks
ship.
later, yeah. So after suffering defeat while fighting alongside his father in battle, Temetomo was forced to cut off his own father's head, as well as the heads of a number of his brothers and relatives. But because he was considered such a legendary warrior, his captors let him live. However, they severed the tendons in his drawing arm and sent him into exile so that he, would no longer... Which doesn't make sense to me. It's like, wow, we can't possibly kill you. You're such an amazing, warrior. But we're going to cripple you so you can't be a warrior, but we won't kill you.
Yeah.
But, the Japanese, legends and their culture in general, they do give a lot more credence to things like... just respect for even your enemies and stuff. Like, I don't know. But anyway, that's the story. He had to kill his own family basically, and they sent him into exile. Some versions of the story state that while he was in exile, he met and knocked up the daughter of the island's leader, and eventually took control of it and the surrounding islands before returning to Japan. In this version, upon his return, he engaged his enemies in a bloody battle. But when it was clear that he would not win, he instead killed himself. Other versions of the story say that he killed himself immediately upon being exiled. But regardless, he's often credited as being the first samurai to have ever committed seppuku.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
So be a trendsetter.
He had a short arm, and he is the first samurai to ever kill himself by horribly stabbing himself in the torso and letting his guts spill out.
Like setting up some badass Yakuza games for years.
So that's the first guy. Pretty straightforward. He was known for being a really good archer and known for suicide.
Yeah. It's good to have talents.
The next guy is Miyamoto Musashi. He lived from about 1584 to 1645. He was a ronin. He was a samurai, but he didn't serve any particular... clan or master or whatever. So Miyamoto Musashi was born sometime around, like I said, 1584. Like many legendary historical figures, his early life isn't particularly well documented. But he was raised first by his father and then by his uncle. They think his father died at some point when he was around 7 or so. His father was a master swordsman, so Musashi was trained to fight from an early age. At the age of 13, he accepted an invitation to duel that had been posted by a wandering swordsman named Arima Kahei. So apparently that was something that samurais, or swordsmen did back then. They would just wander the countryside looking for other swordsmen to fight. Musashi's uncle tried to talk him out of the duel because he was only 13, but he wouldn't back down. So although his opponent...
Tom Petty song, I was like, I can't.
Yeah, I can't. But his opponent was armed with a sword. Musashi charged in with nothing more than... one version says a wooden practice sword. The other says a wooden staff. But Musashi quickly threw the opponent to the ground and then struck him in the throat so hard that Arima died vomiting blood. So he won. Good for him.
I guess.
Yeah.
Seems really brutal.
It does. And I'll talk about it a little bit as I go through. This guy's story is, I think, the longest of the ones I have, but he began traveling the country looking for other master swordsmen to challenge. One of his most famous stories comes from his duels against the famed swordsmen of the Yoshioka clan. In his first duel, which was against the head of the Yoshioka clan, like school of swordsmanship, whatever. A lot of this it was hard for me to understand because I don't know ancient Japanese samurai culture.
You went to school and learned how to hit shit.
Right.
That's what you need to know.
I think the way I took it was that his first duel was the head of this clan, and this was just a clan of warriors that were just well regarded for their ability as swordsmen. But the first duel he came out victorious when he knocked his opponent out with a strike to the shoulder that also left the master unable to use that arm. So that kind of fucks you up if you're a master swordsman, at the head of your warrior clan, and you can no longer use one of your two arms. So at that point, control of the school was handed over to his equally skilled brother. Apparently not knowing what equally skilled meant, he also challenged Musashi to a duel, which Musashi won. Which makes sense, because if you're the same skill as the person that lost, you're probably going to lose. So aside from embarrassing the Yoshi whatever clan by defeating both their top men, Musashi had insulted them by showing up late to both of these duels, and showing up basically just disheveled, not he's like unbathed and didn't show up on time, and it was kind of insulting. So a third duel was arranged, but this was merely to serve as a chance for the Yoshioka to spring a trap and exact their revenge. They would surround the duel with soldiers and archers and kill the samurai when he least expected it. However, Musashi showed up hours early to the third duel instead of showing up late and discovered the ambush. So at which point he ended up killing his opponent, the person he was supposed to duel, and then making an escape while cutting down as many as 12 soldiers that stood in his way. It was during this fight that Musashi first drew a second sword and began fighting with a sword in each hand. So he became known as the father of this two-sword fighting style, which is pretty fucking cool. And he continued to develop it over his lifetime. So it wasn't something that, like, samurais did. And he was just like, if one sword's good, two's better.
Yeah. So this is just making me want to play Samurai Showdown.
There's going to be a lot of parallels to video games.
With katanas? You gotta be kidding me.
I'm kidding, yeah. Nobody's ever tapped into that.
I got an interesting game idea. I think it's going to blow your mind. Swords.
Swords. So in his early 30s, Musashi fought a samurai named Sasaki Kojiro. Kojiro was known as the Demon of the West, or Demon, and was extremely...
Fuck him up, Musashi.
Well, Kojiro was an extremely accomplished, extremely well-known swordsman, probably the best in Japan at the time. And he was known to wield a nodachi, or a Japanese greatsword. It's like one of those really, really fucking long, curved katanas, basically, I think.
Big bastards.
Yeah. So
and that's
Musashi,
what it means in English. Big bastard.
Big bastard. Well, Musashi again showed up late to the duel, and unkempt, which insulted Kojiro and his followers. Musashi also chose to fight with a bokken, which is a wooden sword. Some say
dude.
that... Yeah.
This guy's a
Some
pimp.
say he even carved it out of one of the oars that he had used to row himself out to the island where the duel was being held. So, during the duel, of course, Musashi managed to kill Kojiro, and then he had to flee from the angry followers, who were kind of pissed that he insulted them and then killed their, leader.
Just murdered by the biggest douchebag.
Right.
In all of samurai history. Yeah, I'd be pissed too.
But the fight left Musashi kind of depressed. He was upset that the duel had led to the death of such a legendary swordsman. So at this point, he swore off lethal duels forever. And that's what made me have to go to Google and kind of side look up
it's
stuff.
Like you had everything you needed to make that not a lethal duel, and you insist on hitting people in the throat and shit.
Well, that's what I found out, because I'm reading the story and I'm like, did people really just walk around and say fight to the death? Okay, I agree.
Or was it just let's just fight?
Well, it sounds like most of the time, these duels went on a lot, apparently. And most of the time, they wouldn't fight to kill each other. Although it sounds like a lot of times they were using actual weapons, so I'm sure you walked away not,
You remember you remember it was a sword fight by the end.
But from time to time, they would agree ahead of time that this would be a fight to the death. So apparently that's what this fight was, is it's like, yeah, I'll duel you, but we're dueling to the death. And then he killed the guy. It's like, man, killing people kind of sucks. It's like, well, yeah, because you're doing it for no fucking reason.
And you're clearly better than all these people you're fighting. So it's like not even proving
right.
You're the best, because like, yeah, we know, dude. You haven't used a real sword in like 3 fights now.
So before his death, Musashi wrote a book called The Book of Five Rings, which outlined his fighting style. And I mean, it's a book it's out there.
It's
and
just
a book
different
called
types of donuts you liked.
Yeah. Well, see, curlers have
donuts.
advantages. Yeah. And he wrote a book called The Tokodo, which was basically just a guide for being self-reliant, because for most of his life he was just this like wandering samurai. Although he did fight in actual battles where he'd take side like a mercenary almost. But mostly he just walked around dueling people. During his lifetime, he apparently fought as many as 60 duels and won all of them. He never lost. Which, that was the other thing at first I was confused about. I'm like, well, if they're dueling to the death, of course he never lost, because then he'd not be able to fight his next duel. But like I said, it turns out most of them weren't fights to the death, but it didn't matter. He never lost. So he is a real person, and of course, like we've talked about it with other history, how much of his story is true and how much isn't. Most of it's up to legend. His books that he wrote does give some background into his life, but they were written by him.
Yeah.
So, he could say whatever he wants. But to this day, Miyamoto Musashi is considered the Kinsei, I probably said that wrong, but which is literally the sword saint of Japan. Which I read the phrase sword saint when I'm doing research, and I'm like, fuck that guy. Because that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Fucker. Next guy is Date Masamune. He lived from like 1567 to 1636, and he was a daimyo. Basically, he didn't like fight as a samurai for a ruler. He was like a feudal. It was a little bit different than being a shogun or something, but he was still like a regional.
Charge of shit.
Yeah. So Date Masamune was known as the One-Eyed Dragon. That is because as a child, he lost sight in his right eye after falling ill to smallpox. There's various stories surrounding the how and the why, but one way or the other, Date tore out his eye entirely. Some say it was to prevent the spread of the disease, which makes no sense. Some say he was convinced that it would be a weakness if he had this lame eye, so he tore it out, and that doesn't make sense either.
No, it is a weakness, because if your eye doesn't work, you rip that shit out and you put coins and stuff in the socket. You make it an advantage.
That's right. At the age of 14, Masamune led a campaign in his father's war against the Soma family. And then at age 17, he became the head of the whole Date clan after his father retired, which I never realized was really a thing back in this time, like to be like I said, it's a daimyo or whatever, but it's pretty similar to being a shogun or something. Just instead of over the whole country, it's over a region. And they always seem to just get slaughtered or something. Instead, he was like, nah, my 17-year-old son's kicking everybody's ass. He can rule. So Masamune's army wore armor painted black with helmets of gold. But he had a unique large crescent affixed to the top of his helmet, which made him stand out in battle, and would only serve to intimidate his enemies as they saw him cutting his way through the battlefield.
It would work.
Well, that's why, again, we're not a video game podcast anymore, but we both just played through Sekiro. And if you look up pictures of Date Masamune, which obviously they're not photographs, but paintings and stuff, he is basically that General Ishin from the game. Like, he's missing the eye, he's got the same helmet, like, he looks...
He's a straight-up fucking Dynasty Warriors character, like the type of guy who you imagine in the middle of a battlefield and every swing is sending like 10 guys flying into the air. Just straight up anime shit.
And then this gets even more. The next thing I'm reading through is, like I said, I picked this topic specifically because I finished that game and I couldn't think of anything else to read about. But they said, Masamune is at the head of the Date clan. After an allied clan defected to rival Ashina clan, and I'm like, fuck, that's from the game too. Masamune launched a campaign against the Ashina and their allies. One of these allies was named Hetakayama Yoshitsugo, or something along those lines.
You nailed the first name there.
Yeah.
I was impressed.
When I was writing it, I was getting the last name down, but it doesn't carry over to reading.
Oh, there's so many syllables with you people.
Yoshitsuga Suguyu. That's it. Yoshitsuguyu. Or something. I don't know. Anyway, this guy, he was one of the allies of the Ashina who Matsume, whatever, was, launching his campaign against. But he realized that they were going to lose anyway, so he decided to surrender. But during the meeting, he instead took Masamune's father hostage. In the coming battle, Yoshitsuga used Masamune's father as a human shield on the battlefield. So he's literally holding this dude's father out in front of him as they're fighting. Like, haha, he can't get me. But as Masamune made his way to him, his father told the son to go ahead and open fire, even if it meant killing him in the process. Basically it's like the speed quiz with Keanu Reeves. You shoot the hostage.
Yeah.
But before that could happen, Yoshitsuga slit the father's throat. I'm not really sure that there was anything that he could have done at that point that could have made his story end worse. But there's probably also nothing that he could have done to make it end any better either, because at that point you already kidnapped the guy's father and used him as a human shield.
Yeah.
But anyway, once his father was dead, Masamune and his army slaughtered Yoshitsuga or whatever and his forces, then captured and tortured his entire family. So
great.
Whoops. Yeah. Which is kind of what you deserve if you're like, man, there's no way we're going to surrender. It's like, I can just picture him at that meeting with the Date clan, we vow allegiance to you. We're going to lay down our arms. And he's like, I could grab this guy's father right now. Ha ha. And then once you do it, you're like, oh, fuck. What's I'm committed now.
Shit, I actually have to do this, don't I? Fuck. And then when you do it just pisses him off.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he expected it to do. Be like, oh, you bested me. Okay, we'll leave you alone. If you're an unstoppable warrior and then you... Yeah.
You caught me with the old kill my father ploy. All right, I'll leave you alone.
Checkmate, good sir.
Good game.
Anyway, Masamune would go on to become an important figure in Japanese politics, even taking an interest in foreign diplomacy, which at that time was a very controversial, stance to take. He even organized an expedition to visit the Pope in Rome. So that's interesting. It's weird to me. I think this is the first time I've done a topic that's talking about these legends, but they're actual people. There's real history there. Now, a lot of this stuff is being...
It's embellished,
Yeah, right.
It's like cowboy stories. We've talked about those before, how a lot of that is a lot of bullshit mixed in with real events. So it's that's how they become legendary figures, is, they do some interesting stuff and then tell people they did even more. And that's...
Yeah. When you're this guy threatened to capture my father, so I killed him. And everybody's like, oh, and they go to tell that story. They're like, well, he threatened to kill his father, so he killed him back. And everybody's like, okay. And you're like, well, but... And you start embellishing it to make it interesting.
And he shot down a ship with one arrow, yeah.
So Honda Tadakatsu lived from about 1548 to 1610, and he was a samurai for Tokugawa Ieyasu. Fuckers. Making me say weird words. That Tadakatsu is known as one of Ieyasu's greatest generals. given that Ieyasu would go on to become the first Tokugawa shogun, who would end up ruling Japan from about 1600 to 1868, so over almost a 300-year rule. Honda Tadakatsu, God, has it? I told you, I fucked up in picking this topic. Ticky Ricky
It's
Ticky.
just the sound of a drum, like hitting cymbals, like.
If I was smart, I would have just like kept it at Honda, but that's never the right person. Because that's more like the family name, and then his individual name is the other. Whatever.
So call him E Honda, like the Punch-Out character.
He's Tada from now on. How about that? Tada.
Ta-da! All right.
But anyway, given
Tic.
that he was one of the most successful and well known generals of the clan, taking over their rule that would end up lasting almost 300 years. Of course, Tada himself has endured as one of Japan's most legendary military figures, samurai specifically. But he fought in the Battle of Mikitagahara, which would be one of Ieyasu's greatest defeats at the hands of the Takeda clan. I like the Takeda clan. That's easy.
I like the Tequila clan.
That too. So he took part in that fight, which was one of the biggest defeats, but he was also present at the Battle of Nagashino, which is where they'd exact revenge against the Takeda. There he commanded a troop of musketeers, and thanks to his expert use of ranked muskets, in other words, as one group fired, another would reload, and the third would clean their barrels, he and his men would cut down the enemy with a never-ending volley of gunfire. So it was still that early period where, it's always a little weird to me to be reading about samurai, and then they're like, he commanded, this musket troop. It's like, yeah, they overlapped, but it was still those early days where the idea of rotating your lines of fire so that you can constantly, fire on the enemy was one of these new cutting edge strategies. During another battle, when Ieyasu's main forces left Tadakatsu's men behind while they moved to engage other enemies, Tadakatsu spotted a large regiment of enemy soldiers moving in pursuit. So basically, he was a small force. They were engaged in a battle, and the main force is like, we need to go over here. And as they left, Tada could see all these enemy soldiers moving to follow them, to pursue them. So he and a group of his men rode out to meet these enemies, even though they were outnumbered at least 50-1. The enemy general admired his bravery so much that he ordered that neither he nor any of his men be harmed. I'm curious how that exchange ended then. Did he just ride out to meet them, and then they're like, oh, that's brave, let's not fight. And then they had tea or something, I don't know.
I don't know. There's been cases of honorable meetings and shit.
I prefer the idea where the general's like, I respect that, don't hurt this man. As he and his men are cutting other guys down. It's just like, yep, you've got us, good sir.
Not like those fuckers. I like you.
Don't fight back, don't fight back. Anyway, he would become known as one of Tokugawa's 4 heavenly kings. But what made
just to make sure you stay humble.
Yeah. Well, this is a thing that I think was kind of bestowed upon him way after the fact. It's one of those just the legendary, when you pick out, these were the founding fathers of our country, that kind of deal.
It's like if I ran to be president or something, I would totally be that asshole who's like, hey, and if I win, I promise I'll change the title to God King of America.
I'd vote for you.
You should. I'm a God King.
But what made Tadakatsu stand out to me is what made Tadakatsu stand out to his enemies. So to the top of his helmet, he had the typical samurai armor, but on the top of his helmet, he attached a large set of antlers that made him
large floppy dildo that was just silly.
And his enemies were like, what the? And then they get cut in two. But he had a pair of antlers on the top of his helmet that made him highly visible on the battlefield. It's just like the one-eyed dragon guy that had the big crescent. A lot of times, if you were a well-known, like, fearsome samurai, you wanted to stand out because that made your enemies go, "Oh shit, here comes, you know, Tadakatsu." Instead of the traditional katana that samurai often used at the time, he used a spear known as the butterfly cutter. Of course, it's got a Japanese name, but that's what it translates to.
Yeah.
It's a name that was earned because it's said to be so sharp that if a butterfly were to land on the blade, it would be cut in two under its own weight, which would be a very convenient blade to have if you're fighting people all the time. In fact, the spear itself still exists. It's one of the 3 great spears of Japan. I know part of Japanese cultural history, one of the things that they consider national treasures are these weapons from these time periods.
Yeah.
He also carried a sword known as the God, why did I even bother writing this? Nakatsukasa. There we go. Nakatsukasa Masamune, which is also a national treasure of Japan and still exists. Masamune is known as Japan's greatest swordsmith. I don't know a lot about it because I'm not, obviously you can tell because I'm butchering all these words. I'm not like the world's biggest Japanese culture and legend scholar, but the swords from this guy I did learn a little bit about in a Nova episode years ago. They're super highly prized, but a lot of them sadly were lost after World War II when, of course, the U.S. came in and made Japan turn over all their weapons and included a lot of these swords. And, of course, they ended up getting stolen and sold off by American soldiers. So cool. But even his horse is legendary, and his name is Mikun Goro or something. But basically, everything that describes this guy, he's that horse boss from Sekiro.
Yeah.
Sekiro. He's got the spear, he's got the antlers, he rides this big imposing horse, and it's oh, that's cool. My last one's really short and thankfully very easy to pronounce.
Keanu Reeves.
Otherwise known as Neo. That sounds... Tomo Gozen lived from about 1157 to 1247 and served Minamoto Yoshinaka. The most obvious thing that sets Tomo Gozen apart is that she was a woman. Although it turned, women in feudal Japan did often fight. The wives of samurai in general, were often trained in combat because they would often be left to, take care of the domestic issues and defense while the husbands were out, on their campaigns.
Yeah.
But anyway, she served, like I said, Minamoto Yoshinaka, who they probably married to. Some said that she was, just part of his, household or whatever, maybe a servant. But most of the stories say she was married to him. But she was proficient with both a bow and the longsword, and she was also a very skilled horseback rider. During the Battle of Yokotagawarara, she is said to have... I don't know why I even tried this whole time. She is said to have collected the heads of 7 mounted warriors, which, for a single person in combat to decapitate 7, enemies, that's pretty good. In the age of guns, we'd look at that and be like, oh, so you killed 7 people, that's all right. But this was one-on-one fighting people, through a battle. Tomo Gozen fought alongside her probable husband, Yoshinaka, at the Battle of Owazu, where they were outnumbered 300 to 6,000. It didn't go very well, and quickly their numbers were reduced to exactly 5. Tomo Gozen and Yoshinaka were 2 of the 5 still standing when Yoshinaka ordered her to flee the battlefield. According to some accounts, she's his wife. Of course, he wants her to leave because he cares about her. according to a lot of accounts, it was more that he thought dying alongside a woman was shameful, and so he wanted her to leave. Either way, she apparently did manage to escape. I don't know if it's like escape so much as like it kind of seems more like it's,
all right.
Like at that point when you're down to 5 people and you're again respect went a long way in feudal Japan. If you say okay, fine, I'll leave, it sounds like they just let her leave, but maybe she had to like flee. I don't know. But there's really no record of what happened to her after that. So, of course, like this kick-ass like female samurai has like the least amount of information about her. But
at least there's a name there, though. At least they didn't say like the fucking men around her did everything, you know?
Yeah, or even like kind of give credit, but be like Yoshinaka's wife.
Yeah.
Or Yoshinaka's concubine. But other than her being obviously pretty kick-ass, and there's a few other battles, but the details are scant. But what I liked about her was that she very much reminded me of, what is it, Emma?
Oh, yeah. Emma.
Because, yeah, she was like the servant, and she was said to be beautiful, you know, with her long hair, which is apparently also scary. I don't know. Yeah. But that she, like, was so good with the sword, like, when she needed to be, and that kind of described that character. So basically, like, I used that as a springboard just to get a topic, but the more I was reading about these, you could really see where, and it's not surprising, it's not like, wow, what a coincidence, but you could see where they were drawing their inspiration for the game from these legendary, you know,
right.
samurai. None of the names really crossed over other than the fact that there was the Ashina clans in the game, and that was the name of a clan. But it was just really neat to see. There's too many of them, or like there's too many individual similarities from one samurai that fit specifically one character. It wasn't like they took a bit from this one and a bit from that one. And like I say, if you look up these characters, they even designed them appearance-wise. A lot of them, you know, I do a Google search for the person and be like, holy shit, I want to fight this person because they're a boss.
To be fair, I do that with any history. Like I just look up pictures like, I bet I could kick his ass.
Yeah. Thomas Edison, push over.
Edison, yeah, nice electricity, dick. See how it works with this
steal my
wooden
fighting
bat.
style too? Yeah. I've got rubber boots and rubber gloves. Ha-ha. Invincible. Because that's how electricity works, folks.
Yeah. If you're... That's how Spider-Man fights like electric villains. It's just, I'm going to be head to toe in rubber.
Rubber. Not head to toe, just mostly the feet thing, so you're not grounded.
Well, there were those movies where it looked like he was like... It looked like his suit was made out of like a basketball or some shit.
Yeah.
Those were bad. So let's not talk about those anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, you know... I always have like this loose understanding of like samurai stories and stuff, but I never really can dig that deep in because truth is like there's not that much meat to a lot of those stories. It's kind of like to build up their rep. It's just like, hey, and then they did this battle and then this battle and then this battle, and it's not like, well, what actually happened in those battles? Like, even if it's embellishment, I much prefer like the fantasy of like he shot a boat and killed it with one arrow, you know. It's
right. Yeah, I mean, and it's very tough for us. Like I said, it's grounded in real history, but your comparison to like our cowboy stories, you know, that was something I was thinking while I was writing these. But you got to keep in mind, our cowboy stories are already so embellished and hard to actually trace the real history back. And they're only like 200 years old.
Right.
Sometimes not even. And here we're going back 500-600 years or more. In some cases, almost 1,000. So, yeah, a lot of the times the actual like confirmable history falls into that group where it's just like, well, yeah, this clan was fighting this clan and they were part of this shogunate you lose me instantly on that.
Yeah, because it's like, you know, I can barely keep up with like mobs in America that were feuding, you know, 20 years ago. Like I can't keep track of that. you expect me to understand like the fucking regional conflicts of ancient Japan. Like, get out of here.
But it was such an interesting time for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest is, like I said, it just happened to fall during that evolution in combat where you went from this, hand-to-hand, and a lot of times one-on-one, like, dueling combat to, like, the introduction of guns and cannons and more modern tactics.
Subtraction of honor.
Right. Because people really figured out in the end, they're like, well, fuck honor. Winning is what matters. Like, when death is on the line.
But they figured it out, like, in, like, European conflicts and shit. Like, we were still centuries away from realizing, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't drum at each other if we're trying to kill.
Hey, kid, we're going to go into one of the bloodiest battles in history. Will you play trumpet on the front lines? Fuck no.
It's like, wait, do I get a rifle? If one of us dies next to you, you might be able to grab one. But you have to finish the song first.
Don't worry, son. They won't shoot at you. There's honor in the enemies. Although they can't control at all where their oddly shaped lead balls are headed.
Hey, those giant fucking cannonballs keep landing in that field. Let's head towards them.
Blow that bugle. Blow it well.
Instead of fucking...
Prap.
Yeah, I mean, and we give old war shit, but like modern war is still like the dumbest fucking thing ever.
Yeah.
Like, but at least, there's a element of like, hey, maybe we should try to survive too.
Yeah, that's the thing, is a lot of these older wars, it was just like, throw bodies at it. Like, yeah, most of ours are going to die, but as long as more of theirs do, we win.
Yeah.
And now it tends to be, although I'm sure there's people in the military that would say, maybe not so much, but I like to think that our tactics are, okay, how can we win and keep us alive?
I think the individual skill sets of soldiers are more advanced, but I think the overall philosophy of war is still very much that as long as more of their people die than our people die, then we're good.
Right.
So it's still a really fucked up thing we're doing.
I do hope that there's at least one of our soldiers somewhere that's got antlers glued to his helmet so that he strikes fear in the hearts of anybody that's afraid of deer.
I just wish it could end more with like that kind of like your leader versus our leader. Well, especially with our leader now. There's like one-on-one duel,
Oh, we lost, but it was worth it. Thank you very much, Canada.
Like it could be like the Super Bowl. Just sell it on that level.
You know how much money I'd pay to watch like Trudeau get to fight Trump in the octagon?
I'm not like I'd fuck octagon. I'm thinking full blown katana fight, and like I would wear any other country's jersey right now. But anyway, that's episode 49. We're here. We're on the cusp of 50, which is crazy, and at the same time we've been working towards it for like I've been working on my story for the last couple weeks. So like, it's that mixture of like, holy shit, 50 episodes and also like finally like we can fucking do this horrible idea that took way more effort.
But it's only fair because we've made fun of other people's writings multiple times. It's time to show that we're not being mean and picking on them, that we're willing to throw ourselves under
or that
bus
we are
too.
being mean and that we're going to be really mean to each other.
Oh, that's true.
Like, it's like the most bitter critique. Like, what the fuck, dude? Learn to structure a sentence. Like for me, I'm already like self-conscious about how often I use commas instead of like dashes. But I like commas more. They're fun.
I like the M dashes, so.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly one of the kings of the run-on sentence, so.
I call the comma the Ben dash.
The Ben dash.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, definitely check us out next week. But this week ended up better, although you had to suffer through me trying to pronounce words that are not.
But I live for it, honestly, because it makes your makes you really appreciate the fact that at least I know one language.
Though the worst part is most of them aren't that hard to pronounce, but they are when you're trying to read something live.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
like
that's
when I was
the thing.
writing.
Like, writing my stuff is like you're writing everything else in English. If I reread the name like 3 times, I can say it fine. But it's like trying to read it like in the context of everything else you're trying to say. It just comes out as like fucking mouth vomit. It's just like karetsu.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally thinking that when I was doing my notes, like, man, this is a bad idea. But then I'm reading it, and I'm like, that's not that hard to pronounce. I can get that.
Right.
But no, I don't think I hit I hit one guy's first name.
Yeah.
Once. Yeah. Anyway.
You almost had Tokugawa. You got it on the second go, but the first time. Yeah. But yeah, that's the show. We'll be back next week. See you for the event. The big event.
The big
one.